A babysitter's diary exposed the darkest family secret. The humid Georgia air hung heavy, thick with the scent of honeysuckle and unspoken dread. Inside the sprawling, plantation-style house, the rhythmic tick-tock of the grandfather clock echoed through the silent halls, each tick a stark reminder of the time slipping away. Sarah, a wide-eyed college student, had taken the summer babysitting job for the seemingly perfect Reynolds family, hoping to save money for her tuition. Little did she know, she was stepping into a nightmare. Mrs. Reynolds, with her polished smile and perfectly coiffed hair, had seemed warm and welcoming. Mr. Reynolds, a prominent local attorney, radiated an air of quiet authority. But their two children, 8-year-old Emily and 10-year-old Thomas, were unsettlingly subdued, their eyes holding a depth of sadness that belied their young age. Sarah, a natural observer, noticed the subtle cracks in the Reynolds facade, the hushed arguments behind closed doors, the way Emily flinched at a raised voice, the way Thomas's drawings were always dark and violent. She started keeping a diary, documenting her observations, a silent witness to the unseen turmoil within the grand house. One sweltering afternoon, while the Reynolds were out at a charity event, Sarah stumbled upon a hidden compartment in Mr. Reynolds' study. Inside, she found a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with his chillingly detached entries. He detailed his controlling nature, his need for absolute power, and his increasingly violent outbursts. He wrote of correcting his children, of disciplining his wife, his words laced with a disturbing sense of justification. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. The picture was clear. Mr. Reynolds was a monster, a predator hiding in plain sight. She felt a surge of protectiveness for Emily and Thomas, their innocent eyes reflecting the horrors they endured. She knew she had to act. She couldn't ignore what she had seen, couldn't let the cycle of abuse continue. But she was just a babysitter, a young woman with no power against a man of influence. Fear gnawed at her, but a stronger sense of moral obligation pushed her forward. Sarah began subtly documenting the children's behavior, their bruises, their terrified whispers. She confided in her best friend, a journalism student named Maya, who urged her to go to the police. But Sarah hesitated, knowing the Reynolds' power, their ability to twist the truth, to silence her. One evening, as a thunderstorm raged outside, mirroring the turmoil within the house, Sarah found Emily huddled in her closet, sobbing. She gently coaxed the girl out, and Emily, her voice trembling, revealed the truth. Mr. Reynolds' discipline was far worse than Sarah had imagined. He was physically and emotionally abusive, his control absolute. Sarah's blood ran cold. She knew she couldn't wait any longer. She had to protect these children, even if it meant risking everything. She decided to leak snippets of the diary to a local online news blog, choosing to keep the Reynolds name anonymous at first, but detailing the abuse. The blog posts went viral, sparking outrage and concern. The community buzzed with whispers, speculation swirling around the wealthy families of the town. Mrs. Reynolds, initially dismissive, began to show signs of fear, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Mr. Reynolds, sensing the shift in power, grew increasingly agitated, his eyes burning with a dark intensity. One night, as Sarah was putting the children to bed, she heard a commotion downstairs. Mr. Reynolds' voice, loud and menacing, echoed through the house. He was confronting his wife, accusing her of betrayal, of turning their children against him. Sarah grabbed her phone, her hands shaking, and dialed 911. Then, she grabbed the children, hiding them in the attic, a small, dusty space filled with forgotten memories. She knew she had to protect them, even if it was the last thing she did. The confrontation downstairs escalated. A loud crash, followed by a chilling silence, sent a wave of terror through Sarah. She heard footsteps on the stairs, heavy and deliberate, and her heart pounded like a drum. Mr. Reynolds was coming. He burst into the attic, his eyes wild, his face contorted with rage. He lunged for Sarah, but she dodged him, pushing the children behind her. A struggle ensued, a desperate fight for survival in the cramped, airless space. Suddenly, A siren wailed in the distance, growing louder, closer. Mr. Reynolds froze, his eyes widening in panic. The police were here. The officers stormed the house, their voices echoing through the halls. They found Mrs. Reynolds unconscious, her face bruised. Mr. Reynolds, cornered in the attic, was arrested, his reign of terror finally over. The truth came pouring out, a torrent of pain and betrayal. Mrs. Reynolds, finally free from her husband's control, gave a tearful statement, confirming the abuse. Emily and Thomas, their voices trembling, recounted their own harrowing experiences. The community, once blind to the darkness within their midst, was shaken to its core. The Reynolds' carefully crafted image was shattered, revealing the rot beneath. Sarah, the unassuming babysitter, had become a catalyst for change, a beacon of hope in a world of shadows. The case went to trial, the courtroom packed with onlookers. Mr. Reynolds, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow, was found guilty on all charges. Justice was served, not by a powerful attorney, but by a young woman with a diary and a courageous heart. The lesson was clear. Even the smallest voice can make a difference. Even in the face of overwhelming power, truth and courage can prevail. Sarah's summer was not about a paycheck. It was about standing up for those who had no voice and about the power of observation. As Sarah packed her bags, ready to leave the house that had become a battleground, she felt a sense of closure, but also a lingering unease. She found a small, unmarked USB drive tucked into the back of Mr. Reynolds' journal. She plugged it into her laptop. A video file opened. It was a recording, a secret video of something that made Sarah gasp. The video showed not only Mr. Reynolds, but other prominent figures in the town, engaging in a much larger, darker network of abuse. The video abruptly cut off, leaving her with a chilling realization. The Reynolds case was just the tip of the iceberg. The real fight was just beginning. The humid Georgia air, once thick with the scent of dread, now carried a different kind of tension. Sarah, her hands trembling, stared at the frozen image on her laptop screen. The faces in the video were not just those of Mr. Reynolds, but of respected members of the community. The town's mayor, a prominent doctor, even the pastor of the local church. A network of darkness, hidden behind a veneer of respectability, was exposed. The USB drive, a Pandora's box of secrets, held the key to a much larger conspiracy. Sarah felt a wave of nausea, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. She had exposed one monster, but now she had stumbled upon a whole den of them. She knew she couldn't go to the police with this. Not yet. The men in the video were powerful, influential, and deeply entrenched in the town's fabric. They could easily discredit her, bury the evidence, or worse. She needed a plan, a way to expose them without putting herself or the children at risk. She confided in Maya, her journalist friend, who was both horrified and intrigued by the discovery. Maya, with her access to online resources and her knack for uncovering hidden truths, became Sarah's ally in this dangerous game. They decided to leak the video snippets anonymously, carefully curated to protect Sarah's identity and to avoid immediate retaliation. They created a secure, encrypted website, a digital ghost, where they uploaded the video clips, along with redacted transcripts of Mr. Reynolds' journal entries, highlighting the involvement of the other men. The website, dubbed the Whispering Pines, became a digital beacon, attracting the attention of online activists and investigative journalists. The town buzzed with fear and suspicion. Whispers turned into accusations, and the once solid pillars of the community began to crumble. The men in the video, realizing their carefully constructed facades were cracking, went into damage control mode. They issued carefully worded denials, painting themselves as victims of a smear campaign. But the evidence was too damning, the whispers too loud. The online community, fueled by outrage and a thirst for justice, began to connect the dots, uncovering a pattern of abuse that stretched back years. They found testimonies from former victims, their voices previously silenced by fear and intimidation. Sarah and Maya worked tirelessly, feeding the online fire, providing anonymous tips and leads to investigative journalists. They knew they were playing a dangerous game, but they couldn't stop. The children, Emily and Thomas, were finally safe, but other children, other victims, were still trapped in the shadows. One evening, as Sarah was working on her laptop, she noticed a strange car parked across the street. It was a black SUV, its windows tinted, its presence unsettling. She felt a chill run down her spine. Someone was watching her. The next day, Maya called, her voice trembling. She had received an anonymous email, a chilling threat, warning her to stop her investigation. They knew who she was. They knew where she lived. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Sarah. They decided to go into hiding, leaving the town that had become a battleground. They found a secluded cabin in the mountains, a temporary sanctuary, where they could regroup and plan their next move. They knew they couldn't run forever. While in hiding, they discovered that the network was not just about abuse. It was about power, control, and money. The men in the video were involved in a complex web of illegal activities, including money laundering and human trafficking. The abuse was just one aspect of their twisted empire. They realized that exposing the abuse was just the beginning. They had to dismantle the entire network, expose its roots, and bring down the men who had profited from the suffering of others. They reached out to a former FBI agent, a man named Jack Ryland, who had a reputation for taking down corrupt officials. He was intrigued by their story, impressed by their courage, and willing to help. Jack, with his years of experience and his network of contacts, became their mentor, their protector. He taught them how to gather evidence, how to protect themselves, how to navigate the dangerous world of organized crime. They began to build a case, piece by piece, gathering evidence from online sources, from anonymous tips, from former victims who were finally brave enough to speak out. They knew they were walking a tightrope, but they were determined to see justice served. One night, as they were reviewing the evidence, they discovered a hidden message in one of the video clips. It was a coded message, a series of numbers and letters that led them to a hidden location, a remote warehouse on the outskirts of town. They decided to investigate, knowing it was a risky move, but also knowing it was their only chance to uncover the heart of the network. They contacted Jack, who agreed to provide backup. They arrived at the warehouse under the cover of darkness, their hearts pounding in their chests. The warehouse was dark and silent, but they could sense a presence, a feeling of unease. They entered through a back door, their footsteps echoing through the empty space. They found a hidden room, a control center, filled with computers and surveillance equipment. They were watching them. Suddenly, the lights flickered on, blinding them. They were surrounded by armed men, their faces hidden behind masks. A voice, cold and menacing, echoed through the warehouse. "Welcome, ladies. We've been expecting you." Sarah and Maya were captured, their fight for justice abruptly halted. Jack was nowhere to be found. The masked men dragged them deeper into the warehouse, into a room filled with cages. Inside the cages, they saw children, their eyes filled with terror. The voice spoke again, its tone dripping with malice. "You thought you could expose us? You thought you could stop us? You're just like the others, naive and foolish." Sarah's blood ran cold. She realized the true extent of the network's evil. They were not just abusing children. They were trafficking them, selling them into a life of slavery. Just then, the warehouse doors burst open, and a team of heavily armed agents stormed in, their voices echoing through the space. The agents moved with precision, taking down the masked men, freeing the children from their cages. But in the chaos, one of the masked men grabbed Sarah, holding a knife to her throat. "If I can't have her, no one will," he yelled, and then a shot rang out. But who was shot?